Okay, so you're probably wondering why I titled this video Why They Gotta Be Blonde though, in reference to a video on Alfred Hitchcock and auteur theory. Well, this video is going to answer that. It's going to examine the theory of auteur and what its purpose is. Now, what we'll do is we'll use the knowledge that we find and examine the theory even further using Alfred Hitchcock's films, the themes within the films themselves, and semiotics. Now, sidebar, what is semiotics?
I'm going to be honest, I don't think I can explain semiotics theory any better than Matt Damon.
It's bullshit.
Not that bit, the next bit.
This isn't even my tie. In fact, our data suggests that I have to stick to either a tie that is red or a tie that is blue. A yellow tie made it look as if I was taking my situation lightly, and I may in fact pull my pants down again at any moment. A silver tie meant that I'd forgotten my roots. My shoes. You know, shiny shoes we associate with high-priced lawyers and bankers. If you want to get a working man's vote, you need to scuff up your shoes a little bit, but you can't scuff them up so much that you alienate the lawyers and the bankers, because you need them to pay for the specialist back in Tenafly.
In that clip, he's basically talking about the meanings of signs.
What idea or feeling did the director want to invoke? So for example, in Psycho, when Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, our main protagonist, is being stabbed to death repeatedly in the shower, what did Hitchcock want us to feel? Was there a deeper message to that scene? We will find all that out and more as we take a deep dive into auteur theory and Alfred Hitchcock himself. Let's start at the very beginning.
Let's start at the very beginning.
The term auteur theory originated from Andrew Sarris, an American film critic. It first appeared in his written notes on the Auteur Theory 1962. Now, Sarris used the theory to analyse and study the work of respected directors like Hitchcock. When developing the theory, Sarris stated that there were three elements to his theory that a director must have to qualify as an auteur. But before we delve further into the details of Sarris's theory, we do need to look further back. Auteur, in its most simple definition, is that a director, such as Hitchcock, are the author of the film. An auteur is the driving force of the film. Their distinctive style of storytelling can be seen in all their work. French cinema is where the concept of auteur originated. Now, there was a group of young men, they developed a new way of thinking about cinema as an art form. André Bazin created a magazine that was called Cahiers du Cinéma with a group of French film critics, which included most notably Francois Truffaut. Alexandre Astrou developed the principle of camera stylo. That basically means that the director should wield the camera like a writer does a pen. That the director shouldn't be hindered by traditional storytelling. Truffaut then later discussed the principles of Cahiers du Cinéma in his writings La Politique des Auteurs in 1954. This idea of being the author of your film and imprinting your own personal style made its way to America, which is where Andrew Sarris then took it and developed it into his theory. Now, there's going to be a few clips I'll put in here.
Sarris, writing for Film Culture, created the term auteur theory in his landmark essay Notes on the Auteur Theory in 1962. In the essay, he outlines three premises as a series of concentric circles for determining whether a director is an auteur or not. The first premise of auteur theory is technical competence of the director as a criterion of value. That is, a great director must be at least a good director, at least holding elementary skills in craft and technique of filmmaking. Now, moving inward, the second premise is a director must have a distinguishable personality that can be seen over and over again in his body of work. Lastly, an auteur imbues his film with an interior meaning, which is extrapolated from the tension between the director's personality and the material he has to work with. At the time, 1962, Sarris lists Ophuls, Renoir, Mizoguchi, Hitchcock,
Chaplin, Ford, Wells, Dreyer, Rossellini, Murnau, Griffith, Sternberg, Eisenstein, von Stroheim, Brunel, Bresson, Hawks, Lang, Flaherty, and Vigo
as true auteurs of the cinema.
Okay, now there are critics of the theory that Sarris developed. Most notably, that would have been Pauline Kael in her writing Circles and Squares, The Joys and Sarris. Pauline Kael, over her writing, said that the theory itself was pointless. If a film works, who cares if the director meets the auteur standard? Why is a signature style across films even important? we should judge the film on its own merit. He also said a film is a film, does it actually make it better to watch all the other work of a director? Say, for example, Hitchcock, watching all his body of work. Does that make Psycho better? Does it make Vertigo better?
When a famous director makes a good movie, we look at the movie. We don't think about the director's personality. When he makes a stinker, we notice his familiar touches, because there's not much else to watch.
She also then said that auteur actually glorifies trash. I think what she meant by this is that people say that a film is good because of the director being popular or critically acclaimed versus actually the film having a story or a narrative that is appealing to an audience.
Their ideal auteur is the man who signs a long-term contract, directs any script that's handed to him, and expresses himself by shoving bits of style up the crevasses of the plot.
The auteur theory implies that it's an individual's vision. Films of Hitchcock may not have been as impactful without the input from others. Film scores by Bernard Herrmann, which created the suspense that Hitchcock showed in his visuals and camera work and in his framing, but without the music, would that have been as impactful?
The cinema is a deep, dark mystery that we auteurists are attempting to solve, and, what is infinitely more difficult, to report our findings in a readable prose. The cinema is a labyrinth with treacherous relation to reality.
I suppose it must have all started when I was in my mother's arms at the age of 6 months. And she said to me, "Boo," and scared the something out of me.
The themes of punishment and being wrongfully accused, as well as the roles of parents, are frequently discussed in Hitchcock's films, and we're going to go into those in more detail now. So the first one we'll look at is the theme that the characters are being wrongfully blamed. The idea of being wrongfully accused is not one unfamiliar to Hitchcock. In his childhood, he was often punished severely by his parents, even if he wasn't the one who did what they claimed. In his films, the protagonists are always under investigation. Take a look at Vertigo. Ex-detective Scotty blames himself for the death of his former partner's wife. The former partner had actually hired Scotty to follow the wife around, and when he was tracking her, Scotty actually failed to save her life when she fell from a bell tower, as he had a crippling fear of heights, and he thought that was his fault that he couldn't go and save her. Unbeknownst to him, there was other factors going on in the background, but because he doesn't know that, he's blaming himself for them, and he's in a sense being wrongfully blamed. That's not the only link to Hitchcock's childhood present in his films. There's also the mother and son relationship that's quite frequent without his work. You don't need to go any further than if you look at the most successful and widely recognised film of his, which is Psycho, and the mother-son relationship within that.
What are you capable of doing?
Do you go out with friends?
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Which is quite a stereotype throughout his films. Strong mothers who cling to their sons. In Psycho, he literally can't let his mother go because of the grip she held on him. He actually becomes her, which is just a saying again of the theme of mother within Hitchcock's films. Now, the next theme that we'll look at is confession and guilt, namely shared guilt. They're also quite prominent themes in Hitchcock's films. The characters feel guilty for their behaviour. They tend to come to that realisation when it's too late to fix it. For example, in Psycho, Marion feels very guilty for stealing the money, but she's already left town. We can see that she's potentially going to make a change and go back, but she doesn't get that opportunity because obviously she's killed. In Vertigo, we witness the shared guilt of Scotty and the wife he is sent to follow. He feels guilty that his fear of heights prevented him from saving her, and then in turn Madeline feels guilty for having used him in the first place. So as you can see, the themes within his films, characters being wrongfully blamed, mother-son relationships that are difficult, clingy, overbearing, cruel.
I won't have you bringing strange young girls in for supper by candlelight, I suppose, in the cheap erotic fashion of young men with cheap erotic minds.
Mother, please.
Okay, the next section we're going to take a look at is semiotic. Auteurs purposely have hidden messages behind camera work, how they structure and direct the actors when doing the dialogue, so that there's different pacing, intent, purpose. For example, if you look at the movie Vertigo, in the scene at the start of the film Scotty is speaking to his former partner. His former partner is basically trying to entrap Scotty to become part of the ruse to cover up the death of his wife. Now, Scotty doesn't know this, and he thinks that he's just having a chat with a friend. A friend needs help, but he's an ex-detective. He's eventually convinced. Now, on first viewing, the audience, we believe this is innocent. We don't think anything of it. However, when you watch it from a second viewing, you will then know that his friend has other purposes, other intentions. He's being more devious. As throughout that scene, not only do you see the way Hitchcock has directed the actors to behave, he also changes camera angles throughout. They're not just a stylistic choice. They have intent, again, evoke the dialogue and the hidden message of the ending to the story of Vertigo. There's a lot of hidden messages and clues within that scene which are quite important, which if you take a deeper look at, you will then notice, especially on a second viewing if you've never watched Vertigo before. Colour is a very important film code used by Hitchcock throughout his movies. It's often used to reveal deeper aspects to a character that might not appear on screen. Melanie, at the start, she is in black. It's a strong character and there's no fragility in her. Then we see her, she's in different outfits. She's actually in greens and golds, and that kind of match the scenery of the beach town. She goes in and she picks up a bird. Now, if you actually look closely at the bird, it's also green and gold or yellow in colour, which could be symbolism for her representing the bird. She arrives with this bird. All the other birds start to arrive. So is she the cause of this tragedy? And if you look at her outfit in certain scenes, it actually matches entirely the background from the grass and the sands. That's Hitchcock once again. She's matched to the bird. She's now matched to the town and the local landscape. He is telling us that she's the reason for these birds attacking. She's become more comfortable with her surroundings, i.e. that's why she's matching the landscapes. However, earlier she matched the bird. She arrived with the birds, and as I've spoke about previously, about her arrival and the arrival of these attacking birds. It's also quite poignant that the first person the birds attack are Melanie, almost like the two stories are that being Melanie being an antagonistic force to the existing relationships that Mitch has, and then the birds being a physical antagonistic force to the civilians and our, protagonists that we're watching on the screen. They are clashing from the get-go. There's a lot to look into in that film. There's a deeper meaning to that, particularly, birds themselves actually are a theme throughout all of Hitchcock's films. Even within Psycho, there's birds constantly within the background. In the scene where you see Marion talking to Norman, there's a big bird constantly looming over the shoulder of Norman, and that could be potentially a sign of a hawk and its prey. He's the hawk, she's the prey, or even in that moment when you're first watching it as a viewer, she could be the hawk and he could be the prey, because we don't know his intentions and what he's capable of just yet. And she has been set up to be the villain so far. She's a thief, she's a liar, she's run away. Again, birds are there at the start of a film to give us a hint at something. Now, another thing that you might see in regards to Hitchcock's films, and one that obviously the title is based on, is a visual aesthetic for the leading lady to always have blonde hair. That's just me making a little bit of, of a joke in regards to that aesthetic, but I mean, it is a common thread through his films, so it is an auteur choice for him to have a beautiful woman with blonde hair. He's not overly specified or talked about it, but there is a clip about him and why he chooses the actors that he chooses, which I'm going to pop in now.
Because I do not like to have women where, how shall I put it, where sex is hanging on them like jewellery. I like to have it concealed like a mystery to find out what sex is underneath.
So as you can see, he does make an active choice when it comes to his casting, but I do think it's just a personal preference that he likes the aesthetic look of a woman with blonde hair. So another big thread amongst Hitchcock's films is the concept of voyeurism. He likes to take the audience on the journey, like they're almost watching this story unfold as if they were there. So for example, at the opening of Psycho, the pan in through the window is like we're joining the scene. Rear Window itself is completely about voyeurism. voyeurism. We see it entirely from the perspective of the male protagonist in his apartment. We actually see a lot of the visuals through specialized camera work, which makes it look like it's the telescope. But again, it's just that concept of making us, the audience, part of that viewing experience. It helps us empathise with their situation more because they are taking us on that journey. But further on voyeurism, there's also, you know, the scene in Psycho where Norman is looking in through a peephole at Marion, which gives us a bit of an insight into Norman, that he's maybe not as clean cut as we first thought he was. But again, it's not only do we see him doing that act, we also see through the peephole. So we become culpable. We're invading her privacy. It makes you as an audience potentially question how you feel about it. Do you feel uncomfortable? Some people have said, in relation to the hidden meanings within Hitchcock's films, women can't be trusted and may even represent castration. Thus, they should be tamed before they take control. Now, that was Laura Mulvey who said that, which is quite evident throughout his films. You can see where she's came up with that, as throughout his films, the women are stopped. So you have Marion killed by Norman, but you have in Vertigo, when Scotty confronts Judy or Madeline, she doesn't have an opportunity to repent or be forgiven. Instead, she dies. So that's again Hitchcock making an active choice to control that situation because she can't be trusted, therefore she needs to go. I mean, Barthes itself is a whole commentary on women not being trusted. As soon as the unknown woman arrives, the birds start to attack. Okay, so that's the end of my video, taking you on a journey from explaining the whole concept and origins of Auteur Theory. We've then looked at Hitchcock as a case study and looked at the themes of his films as well as the semiotic. I do think that there is certainly arguments in favour of Hitchcock being an auteur, but again, like Pauline Kael argues, his films are a collaborative approach. Without the scripts and screenplays that he receives, without the music from Bernard Herrmann, and you know, as well as the cameramen and the cinematographers and actors that he relies upon, the films might not be or might not have been what they were, and his body of work might not be as renowned as what it is, but definitely he is an auteur in the way that he directs. That's something I would confidently say. He takes a screenplay and he makes it his own.